All right, gang. Finally, now the ultra leftist Vice News looks like it is officially no more. It's being widely reported that the media company has announced that it will be cutting several hundred jobs in the next week. And astonishingly, it will discontinue publishing its far left content on its own website, vice.com. I kid you not. Vice is apparently halting the publishing of content on its own website. Instead, they're defaulting, this is the reports, they're defaulting more to their social media channels in the hopes that people will actually see their content. In other words, they're admitting no one's coming to their site anymore. No one's coming to their site. So Vice is hoping that, well, maybe Facebook will save us or maybe our posts on Instagram. More people will see us on Instagram than are going to visit our website. I mean, Vice is absolutely collapsing. Now, a few months back, the New York Times broke the story that the ultra-leftist Vice News was officially filing for bankruptcy. And it really was a bit of a shocker. Vice was once valued at over $5 billion just a few years ago. Yes, that's billion with a B. But alas, it wasn't meant to continue. Some weeks back, the Wall Street Journal reported that Vice News World was closing. But at the same time, there was no indication that the Vice News itself would be going bankrupt. Their flagship Vice News Tonight was also canceled. So there were a lot of red flags, a lot of warning signs. And as you can see, it does turn out that they were all together an overall indication that Vice itself was collapsing. But of course, they're hardly alone. Vice News' collapse comes on the heels of the recent announcement that the ultra-left BuzzFeed News is permanently closing its doors. And around the same time, the Washington Post, the paper with the pathetic "democracy dies in darkness" slogan, well, they announced that they had officially lost 500,000 readers over the course of the last 2 years. And it's all just par for the course of the legacy media as a whole. It's not just Vice. It's not just BuzzFeed. It's not just the Washington Post. Over 2,000 newspapers have folded over the last 15 years. Gang, let that number hit you. 2,000. CNN's audience, they've fallen 90% in the last 2 years. 90%. They literally had to sell off their iconic CNN building in Atlanta. I mean, you probably heard this. They've actually moved back to their original location when they first started. Talk about downsizing. Look, when all's said and done, you know this. The legacy media really is imploded. Gang, this is why this channel is dedicated to awakening you to the reality that we're not winning. In many respects, we've already won. A new conservative age is baked into the cake, and they're doing everything they possibly can to try to prevent it from happening. But there's nothing that the ultra-left powers that be, the ruling political class, the elite, can do about it. It's baked into the cake of the way the whole of the global social order is transforming and changing. There's nothing they can do about it. And the legacy media proves it. It's dying, decaying status. But first, gang, our good friend Mike Lindell needs your help. Mike is one of the strongest patriots working tirelessly for the America First and MAGA movements in this country, and also happens to be a very close friend to this channel, as you know. From election integrity to protecting American businesses, Mike really does it all. And now, as the cabal of deep state lawyers and election machine companies are trying to take Mike down with frivolous lawsuits, he needs your support more than ever. Mike recently said he was going to fight every lawsuit until he wins and will never settle out of court with people who help rig the election. So with this in mind, I want to remind you about the incredible MyPillow deals Mike is offering with my promo code Turley. Now, if you just click on the link in my description below, you can save well over 60% on all sorts of incredible MyPillow products. Of course, Mike is offering huge savings on the new and improved MyPillow 2.0. But gang, I would also recommend hugely Mike's My Slippers, as well as his amazingly comfortable bed sheets. These are some of the comfiest
slippers and sheets I've ever owned. In fact, I would use that word to describe all of MyPillow's products. Comfy to the maximum. So don't wait, gang. Support Mike as he fights for election integrity and gets some extremely comfy things to boot. It's a win-win. Don't wait. Click on that link below or go to mypillow.com/Turley right now.
Remember, the legacy media came out of an older social order, which is itself dying. The reason why the legacy media is dying is because that old social order is dying. It came out of something called mass society. It's a term that scholars use for the kind of social order that arose in the 19th and 20th centuries. And it gave rise to the big, massive urban cities like New York, Chicago, LA. Remember, at the beginning of the 19th century, 90% of Americans lived in rural areas, only about 10% in urban. At the end of the 19th century, it inverted, it flipped. 90% were now urban. So that's where you get New York Times, right? Chicago Tribune, LA Times, Washington Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, Baltimore Sun. All the big newspapers are urban, cosmopolitan, liberal newspapers. It's because they're inextricably linked to a social order. It lasted about 200 years called mass society. Gang, mass society's dead. Mass society's been replaced. It's been replaced with what scholars call the network society. We talk about this a lot on this channel. You should be experts on it if you're a regular. And if you're not a regular, make sure to smash that bell and subscribe button. But a network society is a social order that's not connected and structured around urban areas. Instead, it's connected and structured around the internet. And what that means now, just as we're experiencing right now, what that means is we are no longer relating to each other by virtue of proximity to one another. So if I wanted to make it into the country music scene, I had to move out to Nashville. If I wanted to make it into finance, I had to move out to New York and Wall Street. If I wanted to make it in the gambling industry, I had to move out to Vegas or Atlantic City back in the day. We're no longer related to one another by virtue of proximity. And therefore, we're no longer related to each other by virtue of these mass conglomerate centers like cities and cosmopolitan areas for our jobs and our careers. No. Remote work is now the new norm. We no longer need to rely on proximity in order to get our jobs done. We can live pretty much anywhere we want, because we're now relate to one another, not by virtue of proximity, but by virtue of digital networks, particularly the internet. And what that means is that the very media that was built on top of this old mass society, that very media is crumbling right along with the mass society norms. We no longer need to rely on big media conglomerates to disseminate news and information to us. We have instant access to it via digital information. We're now the news. We're the news today. We are. Everyone with a smartphone is now a cameraman. Everyone with a social media platform is a commentator. When's the last time you seen, one of the satellite trucks, the old satellite trucks that would show up like in Die Hard to try to cover a breaking news story, whether the reporter's listening to the police radar going, oh wait, I think we've got something breaking here. Today, by the time they showed up, you would have already had probably 10,000 people with their phones out filming what was going on. Everyone with a smartphone is a cameraman. Everyone with a social media platform is a commentator. They wouldn't have just filmed it. They would have already loaded up. The media is constantly playing catch up. We are the news now. And the legacy media is going the way of the Jurassic era. And Vice News is but the latest in that ongoing and inevitable demise.